The Middle Ages, also known as the medieval period, began after the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD. This era lasted for about 1,000 years and is often described as a time of transformation, conflict, and gradual development in Europe. It was a period when kingdoms replaced empires, religion shaped everyday life, and new social systems were formed. After the fall of Rome, Europe was no longer united under a single powerful government. Instead, it was divided into many small kingdoms ruled by kings and local leaders. Without the strong administration of Rome, roads fell into disrepair, trade decreased, and cities became smaller. One of the most important systems that developed during this time was feudalism. This system was based on land and loyalty. Kings granted land to nobles in exchange for military service. Nobles, in turn, gave land to knights who promised to fight for them. At the bottom of society were peasants who worked the land and provided food. Life for most people in the Middle Ages was difficult. Peasants lived in simple houses, worked long hours, and had little freedom. They depended on the land for survival and were often tied to it. However, this system provided stability during a time of constant danger. Knights played a major role in medieval society. They were trained warriors who followed a code of honor known as chivalry. This code emphasized bravery, loyalty, and protection of the weak. Knights fought in battles, defended castles, and served their lords. Castles became an important feature of the medieval landscape. They were built as strongholds to protect against attacks. With thick walls, towers, and gates, castles provided safety for nobles and nearby villagers during times of war. Religion was central to life in the Middle Ages. The Christian Church was the most powerful institution in Europe. It influenced politics, education, and daily life. People believed that their actions on earth would determine their fate in the afterlife. The leader of the church was the Pope, who had great authority. Kings often relied on the church to support their rule, and in some cases, conflicts arose between religious and political leaders. One of the most significant events of the Middle Ages was the Crusades. These were a series of religious wars fought between Christians and Muslims over control of the Holy Land. Thousands of knights and soldiers traveled long distances to fight in these wars. The Crusades had lasting effects. They increased contact between different cultures, leading to the exchange of ideas, technologies, and goods. Trade began to grow again, and cities slowly started to recover. Another major event during the Middle Ages was the Black Death. This deadly plague spread across Europe in the 14th century and killed millions of people. Entire villages were wiped out, and fear spread across the continent. The Black Death had a huge impact on society. With fewer workers available, peasants began to demand better conditions and wages. This weakened the feudal system and led to social changes. Despite the challenges, the Middle Ages were not just a time of darkness. There were important developments in art, architecture, and learning. Great cathedrals were built, universities were founded, and new ideas began to emerge. Over time, kings became more powerful and began to unite their territories into larger nations. Trade expanded, cities grew, and a new class of merchants appeared. These changes marked the beginning of the end of the Middle Ages. By the late Middle Ages, Europe was changing rapidly. The feudal system was weakening, the power of the church was being questioned, and new technologies were being developed. The Middle Ages eventually gave way to a new period known as the Renaissance. This was a time of renewed interest in art, science, and the ideas of ancient Greece and Rome. The Middle Ages were a complex and important period in history. They were not just a time of war and hardship, but also a time of growth and transformation. Many of the systems and institutions that exist today have their roots in this era. Understanding the Middle Ages helps us see how Europe evolved from the fall of an empire into the foundation of the modern world.